Chosen one, if you are watching this video right now, it's no coincidence. God has led you to this point for a very deep reason. You've struggled in silence long enough, held it together while everything felt like it was falling apart, prayed with a tired voice, believed when there was no evidence to justify the belief. And now, the shift has begun. Not in the loud, dramatic way the world expects, but in the quiet unfolding of alignment. But before we dive into this life-changing message, take a moment to pause this video and do 3 things. Hit that like button, subscribe to help us reach 20,000 subscribers, and leave a comment with the number 1. This number will send a powerful signal to the universe, amplifying the energy of this video. And if you are ready, trust me when I say that your life will never be the same. Financial freedom isn't a reward, it's a response. A response to your discipline when no one saw, to your sacrifices when no one thanked you, to your vision when everyone else called it a fantasy. You've been planting with tears, you've been sowing with consistency, and heaven has kept record of every unseen effort. Now the soil is moving. Doors are opening in places you've never stepped. Connections are forming beyond your visibility. Ideas are waking up in you. Ancient divine blueprints that come not from hustle, but from alignment. And this time, you won't have to beg. You won't have to overextend. You won't have to compromise your peace just to pay your dues, because what's coming is clean. It's provision without bondage, opportunity without chaos, expansion without exhaustion. You're not being rescued, you're being positioned. This is not charity. This is the harvest. Your name is already being whispered in rooms your feet haven't entered yet. Resources are already making their way toward your reality. And every limitation that tried to convince you this wasn't possible is about to witness what divine reversal looks like. You didn't just survive the lack, you outgrew it. Now prepare yourself, not by striving harder, but by receiving deeper. Financial freedom isn't coming to the version of you that begged. It's coming to the version that remembers who they are. Chosen one, it's not just money. It's mobility. It's clarity. It's the ability to move without fear and give without guilt. And it's already on its way to you, not because of luck, but because of who you've become. This time, it won't come with strings attached. This time, it won't require you to shrink, to trade your time for survival, or to explain why you deserve it, because you've already paid the cost. In growth, in patience, in silence. You walked through seasons where you gave more than you had, poured into others while your own cup ran dry, believed in visions that had no form, yet still, you stayed the course. That's what unlocked this next level. Not the grind, but the grit. Not the noise, but the faith that whispered when everything went quiet. You see, financial freedom isn't just a number. It's not a dollar amount or a salary bracket. It's the internal shift that says, I am no longer for sale. Not my time, not my energy, not my purpose. You've moved from desperation to discernment. Now, you don't just take what's offered, you align with what's right. And because of that, doors that were once sealed are now unlocking from the inside. Not through force, but through frequency. You're vibrating at a level that calls in provision. Not to inflate your ego, but to fulfill your assignment. Because what's coming isn't just for you. It's through you. You'll be the blessing. You'll be the overflow. You'll be the one who funds freedom for others. Not from pressure, but from purpose. So prepare, not with anxiety, but with expectancy. Start moving like the wealth is already on its way. Because it is. Clear the clutter. Protect your peace. Guard your vision. You're not chasing the bag. The bag is chasing you. Because wealth follows order. And you chosen one, have finally become the vessel that can carry both the weight and the wisdom of abundance. This isn't luck. This is legacy, and it's about to begin. You're not entering a season of gain. You're entering a season of governance. This isn't just about having more. It's about managing what flows with clarity and conviction. Because the abundance coming your way isn't random. It's revelation-backed. You've been entrusted, not just blessed. And that's why your process was so long, so silent, so deep. Heaven wasn't preparing you to receive money. It was preparing you to move like someone who understands what money was always meant to do. To build, to free, to elevate, to shift generational ceilings into foundations. The scarcity mindset you broke through, that was the real battle. The self-worth you reclaimed, that was the hidden lock. Now the vault is opening, not for consumption, but for command. Command over your time. Command over your direction. Command over your destiny. You'll no longer wait for permission to live. You'll no longer shrink at the thought of risk. You'll no longer wonder if you're worthy. You'll move like it, because you're not stepping into wealth as a stranger. You're stepping into it as someone who already embodies value. So start preparing your space. Clear out the old thinking. Set boundaries with boldness. Speak your vision into rooms that used to make you feel small. You are not a visitor to prosperity. You are the home it's been looking for. Chosen one, financial freedom is not a future fantasy. It's your current reality in motion. And when it touches down, it won't just change your life. It will confirm everything your spirit already knew was waiting for you. This time, you won't sabotage it. You won't question it. You won't downplay the blessing just to make others feel comfortable, because you've learned, the hard way, what it means to lack, to stretch a little into enough, to create peace while the world around you demanded panic, to keep sowing even when nothing seemed to grow. And now that the harvest is coming, you're not surprised, you're ready to hold it with grace, ready to multiply it with wisdom, ready to protect it with discernment. This is not about luxury, it's about liberation. You'll finally make decisions based on alignment, not survival. You'll move because you choose to, not because you have to. You'll invest, build, support, and rest, without guilt, without fear, without explanation, because you've been refined in the fire of discipline. You've said no when it would have been easier to say yes. You've sat with your hunger, not just physical, but spiritual. The hunger for more, not out of greed, but out of purpose. To do more, to give more, to be more. Now the doors are opening. Not one, many. Streams will flow from unexpected places. Opportunities will find you that you didn't have to chase. Ideas will land with clarity, and execution will feel guided, not forced. But remember, this isn't just for you. It's through you. You've been chosen to demonstrate what alignment looks like when paired with divine provision. So walk in it boldly. No fear, no shrinking, no apologies. Chosen one, you've done the inner work. You've passed tests no one saw. You've remained faithful when nothing around you looked promising. Now the blessing is catching up, not as a surprise, but as confirmation. Financial freedom is on its way, and this time, it's permanent. You stopped seeking comfort in familiar chaos. That was the moment everything began to shift. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because you became clearer. Clarity has a cost. It removes the illusions you once depended on. It forces you to face the truth beneath your excuses. It pushes you to walk away from things that once made you feel safe, but also kept you small. You're not angry anymore, just unavailable. Unavailable for cycles that lead nowhere. Unavailable for conversations that drain instead of pour. Unavailable for anything that doesn't meet you at the level of your becoming. There's power in that kind of stillness. Not the stillness of passivity, the stillness of readiness, where you don't rush, you don't chase, you don't plead. You watch and know. You know what's coming doesn't need to be forced. You know who you are no longer needs approval to be real. You know alignment doesn't beg, it calls. And when the calling gets louder, everything that isn't meant for you starts to fall away. Not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that your frequency has changed. Proof that you've stepped out of waiting and into walking. Proof that what's meant to meet you will only do so at your highest expression, not your watered-down version. So you keep rising, not with noise, not with announcement, but with presence. Because what you carry now speaks without words. It shakes without movement. It attracts without effort. And everything that once felt distant is already moving in your direction. You've been quiet, but not because you're lost, not because you've given up, not because you're confused. You've been listening to the subtle shifts, to the redirections that don't come with warnings, to the inner voice that doesn't shout, but always speaks. There's a new rhythm forming beneath the surface of your life. It doesn't move fast. It doesn't ask for attention, but it's steady, precise, certain. You're no longer looking for signs. You've become one. No longer waiting to be chosen. You've already said yes to yourself. And because of that, the world around you is starting to respond in kind. Not with noise, but with movement. You can feel it in the way certain things no longer hold your attention. In the way your body reacts to anything that feels misaligned. In the way peace feels more valuable than progress. That's not regression, it's refinement. It's the sacred pause before the next arrival. And not everyone will understand it. They'll call it stillness, distance, isolation. But you know the truth. You're not stuck. You're not late. You're not missing anything. You're simply preparing for a life that moves at the speed of truth. And when it lands, it won't feel like a surprise. It'll feel like a homecoming. You stopped measuring your progress by what others could see. That's when everything began to change. Not instantly, not loudly, but deeply. There was a time when visibility meant validation. When you wanted your growth to be noticed, your effort to be praised, your path to be understood. But now, you've outgrown that. Now you don't need anyone to witness it for it to be real. Because the most profound changes don't happen on stages. They happen in rooms no one enters but you. In the decisions you make when no one's watching. In the moments you choose to respond with grace, walk away with dignity, or stay silent when you could destroy. That's where your power is being built now. In restraint, in discipline, in refusing to go back to what you had to heal from. In honoring your own evolution by no longer entertaining anything beneath it. You're not bitter, you're just clear. Not cold, just selective. Not distant, just devoted to what matters now. And what matters now isn't attention. It's alignment. It's protecting your inner space like sacred ground. It's recognizing that peace isn't passive. It's earned. Earned by choosing yourself when it's easier to disappear into someone else's story. Earned by being honest when it would be safer to stay silent. Earned by standing firm when every part of you wants to shrink. There's a new identity unfolding within you. One that doesn't rely on being needed, liked, or understood. One that doesn't tolerate being half seen or half heard. One that doesn't negotiate with what drains its light. You've stopped asking for a seat at tables that never saw your worth. Now you're building your own. And it doesn't need to be big to be sacred. It just needs to be true. So if things feel quieter now, if the noise around you has faded, if people have fallen away, let them. Because what's entering your life next requires clarity. Not crowds, not chaos. You've been walking through spaces that no longer echo. What used to feel full now feels hollow. What used to excite you now feels like repetition. And the truth is, you didn't lose interest. You outgrew the pattern. This isn't boredom. This is awakening. The realization that the old rhythm can't carry the new version of you. You no longer crave stimulation. You crave substance. No longer drawn to movement just for the sake of motion. You've started to understand the difference between noise and resonance. That's why your circle is smaller. That's why conversations have become quieter. That's why solitude feels like sanctuary now, not because you've withdrawn, but because you've returned. Returned to your own voice, to your own pace, to your own standard of peace. And in doing so, you've become unavailable for what drains, unavailable for the shallow, unavailable for pretending, unavailable for dynamics that require you to abandon your own knowing just to keep the connection. There's a shedding happening, not in crisis, but in clarity. The version of you that once needed constant affirmation is dissolving. The identity built on survival is being laid to rest. And in its place, a calm certainty. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. It's in the way you carry yourself now, in the way you pause before responding, in the way your presence disrupts anything inauthentic. Because when you know your value, you stop performing for rooms that can't recognize it. When you know your frequency, you stop trying to tune into others who live in distortion. So if you feel distant, it's because you're being drawn in, inward, deeper, higher, not away from others, but toward yourself. And what's waiting for you there? Not another version to create, but the original one you were always meant to become. You've stopped rushing your life, not because you've slowed down, but because you finally understand timing. There's a rhythm to your journey now, less force, more flow, less proving, more presence. You no longer sprint toward things that don't feel right just because they look right. And that quiet shift, that's power, the kind that can't be faked or borrowed, the kind that's built slowly, brick by brick, in the invisible places where no one claps. This season isn't about expansion on the outside. It's about deepening within. You're anchoring, rooting into a self that doesn't chase approval or beg for attention. A self that doesn't need constant movement to feel alive. Because now, you know what alignment feels like. It feels like peace that doesn't shake. It feels like saying no without guilt. It feels like letting go without needing to explain why. You've learned to stop interrupting your growth just to comfort someone else's delay. You've learned to stop watering dead soil just because it once held something beautiful. You've learned that some spaces are quieter now, not because you've lost connection, but because you've gained discernment. And this discernment is a gate. It filters what enters. It protects what matters. It keeps you from giving fragments of yourself to people who only show up for the parts they can use. What you're building now isn't rushed, noisy, or chaotic. It's intentional. It's sacred. It's sustainable. So don't let the silence fool you. This is not the absence of progress. It's the presence of real transformation. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but becomes undeniable over time. You began to feel a shift the moment you stopped betraying your inner truth. It didn't happen all at once. It arrived quietly, like a whisper that grew louder every time you honored it. This wasn't about fixing your life. It was about remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget, before you molded yourself to be more likable, before you silenced your voice to keep peace, before you called exhaustion ambition and called sacrifice love. You see it differently now. The way people speak without saying anything. The way certain rooms drain your energy while others refill it. The way your body tenses when you're out of alignment. even when your mind tries to rationalize staying. That awareness isn't just growth, it's your real compass. And the more you trust it, the more things begin to fall away. Not because you're pushing them out, but because your frequency is naturally rejecting what doesn't belong anymore. You no longer crave the spotlight, just truth. No longer need to be heard, just felt by those who are meant to find you. No longer try to be understood. You've learned to speak fluently in energy instead. This chapter won't be marked by big announcements. It will be marked by quiet exits, subtle upgrades, decisions made in peace, not pressure. You've become your own answer. And now that you're walking from wholeness, what's meant for you won't require convincing. It will arrive already aligned, already open, already ready. And this time, so are you. You started to notice the difference between noise and truth. What once excited you now feels empty. What once kept you busy now feels like a distraction. And what once passed for connection now feels like interruption. This isn't detachment, it's refinement. Your senses have sharpened, not in the physical, but in the unseen. You feel when energy shifts in a room. You sense when someone's words don't match their frequency. You hear more in silence than you ever did in conversation. That's what happens when you start living from alignment. You stop asking for directions from people who've never left their own loop. You stop chasing opportunities that feel heavy in your chest. You stop negotiating with the very things you were sent here to shift. The old version of you would have compromised, would have settled, would have swallowed the discomfort and called it maturity. But not anymore. Now you honor the inner no, even when it's quiet. You trust the pull away, even when it's inconvenient. You choose peace over performance every time. And because of that, the world is rearranging itself around you. Not instantly, not loudly, but inevitably. What doesn't match your truth is fading. What isn't rooted is falling. What isn't real is being revealed. This is what becoming looks like. Not a loud transformation, but a steady unraveling of everything you're not. So what's left is you. You started listening to the quiet parts of yourself, the ones you used to ignore, the gentle hesitations, the gut feelings, the voice that spoke in subtle knowing long before logic had anything to say. And the more you listened, the more you began to remember. Not facts, not names, but truth. Your truth. The truth that you were never meant to live on autopilot, that you were never built to play it safe, small, or silent. That every time you agreed to something, your spirit resisted, a piece of your fire dimmed. But that fire, it never left. It waited, beneath the roles, beneath the pressure, beneath the layers of who you thought you had to be loved. Now it's rising, not like a flame that demands to be seen, but like a heat that transforms you from the inside out. This is what real change feels like. Not glamorous, not always graceful, but necessary, sacred, unshakable. You've stopped looking for signs in the sky because you've started recognizing them in your body, in the way your shoulders relax when you say no, in the way your breath deepens around truth, in the way your spirit leans toward people who don't demand that you dilute your depth. That's the new compass, not the checklist, not the expectation, but the felt sense of what is real. And when you move from that place, everything changes, not because the world suddenly gets easier, but because you're no longer bending to fit into it. You're no longer making yourself digest what your soul spits out. You're no longer calling suffering noble or confusion spiritual. You've made peace with outgrowing what others still find comfort in. Let them stay. Let them misunderstand. Let them reach for the version of you they once knew. You're not angry. You're just done explaining why your wings no longer fold the way they used to. This isn't rebellion. It's realignment. This isn't distance. It's depth. This isn't change. It's coming home. You began to sense that not everything that looks like progress is actually movement. Sometimes what grows fastest is also what lacks roots. And you're not here to rise quickly. You're here to rise right. This path you're on now, it's not flashy. It's not loud, but it's real. And that makes all the difference. You've started to crave what can't be rushed. Peace that's not performative. Connections that don't collapse under truth. Work that doesn't drain your soul for the sake of appearances. And that craving is divine. It's a signal that your inner world has matured beyond surface rewards. You no longer want success that comes at the cost of your sanity. No longer want relationships that demand your silence to survive. No longer want routines that keep you busy but never make you whole. This is not just a shift in priorities. It's a shift in identity. The kind of shift that makes you unreadable to those still operating from urgency. The kind of shift that causes silence in rooms that once echoed with approval. The kind of shift that leaves people wondering why you're no longer reaching, when in truth, you're finally receiving. Receiving clarity, receiving ease, receiving the kind of alignment that doesn't burn you out just to keep you in motion. You've stopped trying to convince life to give you more and started preparing to hold what it already set aside for you. And that preparation doesn't look like hustle. It looks like healing. It looks like releasing shame that never belonged to you. It looks like letting go of urgency inherited from fear. You're not behind. You're on time. Because the path you're walking now was never meant to be followed. It was meant to be forged. So keep walking. Quietly, boldly, truthfully. Everything real will meet you there. You stop needing to be seen to feel valuable. That was the beginning of everything. Before, there was a version of you that thought visibility was the proof of purpose. That if no one applauded, it must not matter. That if it wasn't loud, it wasn't real. But now you've learned that what's real doesn't always perform. Sometimes it builds in silence. Sometimes it grows in the dark. Sometimes it evolves in private before it ever emerges in public. You've become the kind of person who no longer measures the depth of something by its spotlight. You measure it by its resonance, by how it sits in your chest, by how it calms your nervous system, by how it refuses to betray your soul for attention. There's a strength forming in you that doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't care if it's liked. It doesn't ask for permission. It just is. And that's why you felt the distance lately. Not from others, but from the version of yourself who needed to be needed, who overextended to prove loyalty, who tolerated less just to avoid disappointing more. That version isn't bad. It was just built from survival. But you're no longer surviving. You're becoming, and becoming requires boundaries, requires solitude, requires shedding parts of your identity that were once praised but never aligned. It can feel lonely at first because not everyone is meant to walk with you through this next unfolding. Not because they're wrong, but because you're different now. What's calling you forward doesn't speak in urgency. It speaks in precision. It doesn't rush. It waits until you're ready to move from integrity, not insecurity. You no longer run toward the next thing. You sit still until the next thing rises to meet the real you. And when it does, you won't have to chase it. You'll recognize it because it will carry the same stillness, depth, and clarity that you fought so hard to reclaim. You realize that healing wasn't just about feeling better. It was about seeing clearer. And once you began to truly see, you couldn't unsee. You saw how much of your life was built around avoiding rejection. How many decisions were rooted in fear of disappointing others. How often you said yes while your spirit whispered no. But clarity is disruptive. It doesn't just show you what's broken. It demands that you respond. And you did. You started saying less and meaning more. Started protecting your peace like it was your only possession. Started pulling your energy back from places that never respected it. And at first, it was quiet, awkward, even painful, because walking away from the familiar always is, even when the familiar was slowly breaking you. But you kept going, not because you had a map, but because something deep inside of you knew anything built on self-betrayal will eventually collapse. Now, you're building something different, something anchored in honesty, in alignment, in peace that doesn't demand a performance. You're not moved by noise anymore, not easily impressed, not easily disturbed, because the deeper you go into yourself, the less you need from the world, and ironically, that's when the world starts responding. Not because you're chasing, but because you've become a magnet for what's real. This is your new foundation, not built from urgency, not built for applause, but built to last. And from here, everything that enters your life must rise to meet the level of truth you now stand on. You stopped needing closure from things that were never meant to stay. That decision alone shifted your entire frequency. Not every ending is meant to be explained. Not every silence needs to be filled. Some things fall away simply because your spirit outgrew them, and that's enough. You used to chase resolution, thinking it would bring peace. But now you understand. Peace isn't found in answers. It's found in release. And you've been releasing, quietly, intentionally. Not to punish, not to prove anything, but because your soul has learned to let go without resentment. That's maturity, not how you rise in front of others, but how you detach without bitterness. You've changed your posture. You no longer lean into things that pull you away from yourself. You no longer compromise clarity just to maintain connection. You no longer explain your boundaries to people who never honored your presence. And with that shift, you've entered a different level of stillness. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels complete. Now you walk lighter, not because your path is easier, but because your load is no longer filled with what isn't yours to carry. You've begun to understand the power of quiet exits, the strength in not reacting, the beauty in no longer needing to be understood by those who never really saw you. And now, life is mirroring that clarity. What's for you feels easier. What's real feels calmer. What's aligned feels undeniable. This is your reward. Not the applause, not the recognition, but the inner knowing that you are finally living in harmony with who you truly are, and you didn't need anyone's permission to get there. You stopped looking back, not because the past wasn't real, but because you finally understood it had no more answers for who you're becoming. For a long time, you kept revisiting the same memories, trying to figure out what you missed, what you could have done differently, what version of yourself might have been more accepted, more loved, more understood. But that was never your task. Your task was never to rewrite the story. It was to outgrow it. You don't need closure anymore. You need expansion. You need new ground, new language, new air. The kind that doesn't remind you of who you used to be, but holds space for who you're finally becoming. And you can feel it, the loosening, the quiet rebellion inside of you that no longer wants to be explained. That no longer shrinks when things feel unfamiliar. That no longer asks for permission to want more, not in things, but in truth. You don't entertain chaos anymore just because it's passionate. You don't chase temporary highs that cost long-term peace. You've stopped responding to energy that pulls you out of alignment just to feel needed. That's not cold, that's clarity. That's you honoring the parts of yourself that used to be neglected for the sake of belonging. Now you belong to yourself, and that changes everything. Because when you no longer fear being alone, you stop accepting fragments of connection. When you're full on the inside, You stop searching for reflections of your worth in the eyes of those who can't see you clearly. You've stepped into a chapter where self-respect is non-negotiable, where silence speaks louder than begging, where peace is not something you visit, but something you protect. And from that place, everything meant for you will find you, because now it will finally recognize you. You stopped waiting for the right moment. That moment you thought would come with certainty, with a sign, with someone else's approval. But it never came, and so you became it. The moment you stopped waiting was the moment you reclaimed your power. Not the kind that roars, but the kind that knows. Knows that you don't need a green light from the world to walk in purpose. Knows that hesitation is often dressed in perfectionism. Knows that everything changes when you stop asking and start moving. Now, you don't wait to feel ready. You move with intention. You speak with conviction. You act from alignment, not fear. And that shift, that internal choice, it's created space. Space for clarity. Space for direction. Space for everything that had been trying to reach you while you were still negotiating with doubt. You no longer beg for signs. You recognize them. You no longer fear missing out. You understand what's meant for you doesn't come through force. It comes through frequency. This isn't about having it all figured out. It's about trusting what you can feel before you can explain it. It's about taking the step even if your voice shakes. It's about choosing forward, even when backward is more familiar. No one sees the quiet bravery it takes to walk away from what's almost right. No one claps for the moments you choose discipline over distraction. No one celebrates the tiny, invisible choices that create real freedom. But you do. You feel it in your body, in your breath, in the silence that no longer feels empty, but sacred. You stopped waiting, and because of that, your life is no longer on pause. It's in motion, and everything that matches your momentum is on its way. You stopped apologizing for your evolution, not out of defiance, but out of devotion to who you're becoming. There was a time when shrinking felt safer, when you'd downplay your insight just to keep the peace, when you'd explain your boundaries like they were offenses, and carry guilt for simply choosing yourself. But not anymore. Now you move differently, not with arrogance, but with authority, the kind that comes from doing the inner work no one applauded, from sitting with the truth long enough to let it change you, even when it burned. You've learned how to stand still in your own energy, to not flinch when people project, to not bend when expectations pull, to not water yourself down just to quench someone else's thirst for control. And in that stillness, you found something rare: alignment without explanation, peace that doesn't rely on circumstances, a knowing that doesn't need consensus. You're not available anymore for shallow conversation, not interested in staying in places that echo but don't listen, not willing to stay connected to what drains just to avoid the discomfort of departure. That's not rudeness, that's respect for your time, for your capacity, for your calling. What's unfolding now is quiet, but it's unstoppable. You don't need to convince anyone of your growth. You don't need to carry the burden of being understood. You don't need to dim the parts of you that no longer fit in the rooms you've outgrown. You're not becoming someone else. You're finally being who you always were before the world asked you to edit yourself. And the more you return to that truth, the more everything else aligns naturally, without force, without noise, without apology.